Holy that is crazy.
I do think he's going to be in the top 10. I think he's going to shake things up.
Derek's much bigger than 212.
Derek, put your shirt on, man. What are you doing?
Around, ready to go. Definitely ready to go.
This guy's like you that inspire him. He's at the gym. He really is.
Mr. Olympia is right here at the office. Yeah, buddy!
Somebody told me the other day they think Derek Lunsford has the best back in the world in any division.
Olympia.
I believe in you, and I still know you will be Mr. Olympia.
The Mr. Olympia title, the most coveted title in the entire bodybuilding world. Established in 1965 by the Weeders to push bodybuilding to the next level, the Mr. Olympia competition has undoubtedly left a long-lasting legacy. With each new champion being a representation of Mr. Olympia, the look has seen a change over the last 58 years. From Frank Zane's slender build to Dexter Jackson's size and conditioning, it's expected that the standard of what a champion is supposed to be will change over time in one way or another. In just the last 5 years, the title has seen a constant shift of hands that hadn't been seen since the early 80s. A shift that has historically precipitated the crowning of a generationally dominant champion, something that fans both love and hate to see. But with so much change over the last 5 years, the Open Division has been craving that dominant champion that could replicate the success of his unstoppable predecessors. And the 18th Mr. Olympia, Derek Lunsford, could very well be that man. Having risen to the top of the 212 division after years of persistence, he ascended to the open throne in just his second year in the division, creating history in the process. And with his rapid ascent to bodybuilding superstardom and potential that's still untapped, Derek Lunsford's Olympia surge may be the beginning of something very special. But to understand what makes the 18th Mr. Olympia so interesting, we need to go back to the beginning. Derek Scott Lunsford was born May 14, 1993 in Petersburg, Indiana. Growing up, Derek was instilled with an athletic foundation as his mom put him in soccer to keep him active. On top of keeping him active, his mom also led by example. Derek's mom kept up with her own fitness journey at home, inspiring Derek to maintain an active lifestyle himself.
She was always on some diet growing up when I was a young kid, and I was like, what are you doing? Just eat pizza with me. But she was always on some sort of diet and always doing these silly workout videos first thing in the morning on the TV, and I don't know, I think that had to be some huge influence on why I wanted to be a bodybuilder, was because I watched her.
By the time Derek got to high school, he was ready to take on another interest, so he got into wrestling. Attending Pike Central High School in Indiana, Derek was a 4-year letterman, a regional and semi-state qualifier, and a 3-time state placer. He represented Team Indiana at Nationals for wrestling and was a 3-year letterman in soccer as well. According to Derek, it was a friend of his from freshman year who encouraged him to put more time in the weight room so he could add more size. As Derek put it in his 2015 interview with David Hughes of the Tribune Star, "I was pretty puny. I wrestled at 112. So a buddy of mine who had graduated already and was helping me out told me, 'You're going to the gym with me. You're going to get bigger.'" His senior year of high school, he finished with a wrestling record of 7-5. He had also seen a notable amount of growth, bulking up to 130 pounds from his previous weight of 112 pounds as a freshman. Wrestling laid a very solid foundation for Derek for both physical development and weight manipulation. Because to maximize his success, he had to train constantly, not just on the mat but in the weight room as well. So training was something that Derek had gotten accustomed to. He also had to be mindful of the food that he was putting in his body so he could make weight for his meets, something that takes a ton of discipline for any teenager. Now, when Derek graduated high school, he decided he would enroll at Cumberland University in Lebanon, Tennessee in 2012. There, he wrestled for a few semesters before transferring to Indiana State University in 2013. His freshman year of college represented a serious amount of growth for Derek. Having developed a decent enough knowledge base on training and eating to build muscle, he added 10 pounds of mass between his senior year of high school and his freshman year of college. Now, despite the increase in mass, he would not be able to use that to continue to benefit on the mat. After his transfer to ISU, Derek had to move on from wrestling due to the school not having a wrestling program. So he shifted his focus to his business degree, despite not having a love for academia at the time. Now, being back in Indiana, Derek needed a job to support himself while he went to school. So he worked as a server in a restaurant, a job that he wasn't fond of. So he pivoted to working at the GNC at Honey Creek Mall, where he worked hard enough to become a manager. Despite having a ton of friends on the party scene, Derek didn't care to get involved in that lifestyle. Instead, he experienced the itch that many former collegiate athletes usually face, that itch and need for competition. See, up until this point, Derek had been training himself to the best of his ability. Derek would eventually go on to say, "I know tons of people who like to go out and party. A lot of people would say I miss out on a lot. For me, it's definitely a sacrifice. But I love what I do. It's my lifestyle. My party is at the gym. My high is getting a pump at the gym. I just love it. That's my go-to place." His God-given genetics did allow him to stand out and look a lot better than the average gym goer. However, Derek was struggling to find purpose in life. He needed something else to focus on. So what inspired Derek to contemplate taking things to the next level were pieces of media that every bodybuilding fan has stumbled upon at one point or another: motivational workout videos. The iconic videos of Ronnie Coleman, and Jay Cutler, Tom Platz, and Dorian Yates make up a significant piece of bodybuilding lore on YouTube. Anybody who's ever looked for motivation and inspiration in the gym has made watching these videos a part of their daily routines at one point in time. Derek was no different. Despite not being a big bodybuilding fan initially, his immersion into the sport through these videos caused him to not only develop a newfound love and admiration for bodybuilding, but a fire to compete himself. He also credits an unknown bodybuilding documentary for causing him to fall in love with the sport, but it's highly likely that it was either Pumping Iron or Generation Iron given the time frame. Derek eventually incorporated informational and educational content on maximizing hypertrophy. He'd take tips from a lot of bodybuilders' content at the time, using that content as a placeholder for a coach. He'd consolidate the best advice that he could get from some of his favorite pros to form his ideal split and diet. According to Derek though, no other pro had been more inspirational to him than Jay Cutler. However, without having Jay there to coach him, Derek needed the guidance of someone else, and he'd get that in James Brown. James Brown was Derek's manager at a supplement shop he was working at in Vincennes, Indiana, who became his first bodybuilding coach. Deciding to work seriously with James represented a pivotal turning point in Derek's life. He didn't just decide to pursue a career in bodybuilding, he decided to fully commit himself and his life to the sport. Derek says about working with James, "He would give me tips in the gym on how to train properly and smarter. He would give me diet tips here and there. Finally, I just went all out and made him my coach." His decision wasn't difficult, because once Derek felt what he called ignorant confidence, he set on a goal to make a massive name for himself in bodybuilding within the next 2 to 3 years. 2014 was the year he made that commitment, and he gave himself 1 year to step on stage for the first time. He didn't know how good he could really be, but knew he was going to do everything he could to become one of the greats. For Derek, there was no doubt as to how bad he wanted it. No doubt as to whether he'd be able to conform to the lifestyle change, and no doubt that bodybuilding was what he considered his calling from within. With those realizations, it was time for Derek to get to work. Under the tutelage of James Brown, Derek put work in the gym in an effort to get his physique to the next level. He was all in, so much so that he invested almost every dime he had into his bodybuilding career. However, despite the major step forward that working with James represented, Derek would quickly realize that being a bodybuilder was not cheap. Being in college while committing to bodybuilding made his ability to comfortably afford the lifestyle very difficult. So difficult, in fact, that he would often ask his mother to help him out.
I remember there's times where I'd have to call my mother and say, "Hey, can I have $20 or $50 to get chicken for the week?"
His mother's support was instrumental in setting the foundation for his early bodybuilding career, as she had been supportive of Derek from the very beginning. Being described as a fitness addict who was always on a different diet, her lifestyle was the exact influence that Derek needed to stay on track in his own journey. Another major influence in his support system was his girlfriend, Jelson. They met back in high school and bonded on strong Christian values, as well as a passion for bodybuilding, as Jelson herself was an aspiring bikini competitor. With his support system by his side and the burning fire to chase his bodybuilding dreams, Derek was able to get his physique to a point where he was ready to shock the stage like he wanted to, and in 2015, he would do exactly that. Derek made his bodybuilding debut at the 2015 Indianapolis Championships as a welterweight and competing in the open, and all Derek did was win the overall at his first show. A very impressive feat for a debutante. This victory validated to Derek that the praise he had been getting about his physique was not just flattery. He truly had the makings of an elite bodybuilder. Now, despite the newfound confidence, dominating a show becomes a lot harder when going from the local level to the national level, because at nationals, everyone is talented and loaded with potential. So having qualified for junior nationals at his first amateur show, he couldn't pass up on the opportunity to step on that stage as early as possible. Derek stepped on stage at the 2015 NPC Junior Nationals and brought an impressive package at welterweight once again. What made Derek stand out was his incredible shape, in the flow he had to his physique. His symmetry was excellent, and his lat to waist ratio was reminiscent of the aesthetics of the golden era. His back, however, was the shining feature of his physique, as his development was far ahead for most 22-year-old competitors. His leg development needed improvement, specifically in the hamstrings, but he knew how to pose to maximize his best features. Derek left Rosemont, Illinois, the NPC Junior National welterweight and overall champion, a rare feat given his size, with a lot of improvement on the horizon. He dove back into the offseason in preparation for another appearance at Junior Nationals in 2016, but this time in the middleweight division. See, it was clear that Derek's build and shape was perfect for bodybuilding. He just needed more mass. So with a decent amount of lean muscle added to his physique and an improvement on his conditioning, Derek went back to Rosemont and was lights out at the 2016 NPC Junior Nationals. The difference was vastly noticeable everywhere, because he not only improved in his leg development, but his back, arms, and every other muscle group that already stood out. Most notably, his quad sweep was a lot more prominent, making his front poses look way more impressive. All in all, Derek turned heads at the show, a sentiment which the judges clearly agreed with, as he was rewarded with the middleweight victory and the overall victory. This was his bodybuilding coming out party, where the entire industry would be brought to the attention of the name Derek Lunsford.
How do you feel?
Feel on top of the world, man. I'm at loss for words, to be honest. I feel so blessed, man. I had such a good support system behind me through not just this weekend, obviously, but through the last several months of dieting and the training. When I'm suffering and things, they're behind me, my friends and family. So I'm on top of the world right now, man.
In just 1 year into his career, an overall winner at a national show, a career trajectory and pace that had only been seen in the all-time greats. Lee Haney, Dorian Yates, and his idol Jake Cutler are all bodybuilding legends with similar starts to their careers. So suffice to say, the future was looking extremely bright for Derek Lunsford. Further validating his path was the fact that seasoned veterans were reassuring him that he had what it took to be great. This improvement in just 1 year was the green light that Derek and his coach needed to step up and compete with the big boys at the NPC USA Championships. He had gotten into the habit of training 6 days a week with a focus on abs and legs, as well as high reps with control and drop sets. He'd eat every 2 to 3 hours and place a heavy emphasis on macronutrients. So at the 2016 NPC USA Championships, Derek stepped on stage as a middleweight and impressed once again. The added mass did not affect his lines and conditioning, as he brought a very well put together package with size everywhere. It was Derek Lunsford 2.0, and it was looking like it would be inevitable that he'd get that coveted pro card eventually. It was just a matter of when. Now, Derek would miss out in 2016 on a pro card due to finishing second place behind an impressive Charles Curtis.
You were a pretty dominant winner at the Junior Nationals. You came into the USAs. What was it like stepping out onto this stage?
It's a completely different experience, on and off the stage, backstage. High quality competitors. Not saying take anything from Junior Nationals, but I'm telling you, this USA's this year is top of the line. So I knew I had to bring it this weekend. I was confident coming into the show. I was confident during the show, but man, this is a tough class this year. So
after his 2016 Nationals runner-up, Derek decided to take a year-long break to grow and come back significantly better in pursuit of that pro card. He set his sights on the 2017 USA Championships and grinded in the offseason to continue improving. Now, despite being in prep for the USAs, Derek had always had a love for Junior Nationals. He had won the show in back-to-back years and had really developed a love for this event. Not to mention, it was always held in Illinois, a reasonable drive from Indiana. He was also recovering from a hernia surgery he needed to have after 2016 USAs. According to Derek, he had surgery on a Wednesday and was back in the gym by Monday.
I had a hernia surgery back in January, 1 year ago, between 2016 and 2017 USAs, and the surgery was on a Wednesday, and I was actually back in the gym on Monday because I couldn't keep my butt out of the gym. Do I recommend that? No. Probably wasn't a good idea, but the fact that I can't not be in the gym consistently training, I think has really helped me surpass any of the goals that I had set for myself in the last several years.
So in June of 2017, he'd call out of work to show up to Junior Nationals as a spectator and fellow supporter. But unbeknownst to Derek, his attendance at this show would lead to the biggest break of his bodybuilding career. See, in attendance was Ed Connors, fitness pioneer and one of the men who helped turn Gold's Gym into an international franchise. He met Derek at the show and instantly saw his immense potential. Being one of the owners of the original Gold's Gym, Ed had not only been immersed in bodybuilding culture, but the early fitness industry as a whole. He even helped put together the first women's bodybuilding contest in 1979. So, suffice to say, Ed not only had an eye for talent, but had a vast number of connections and pull within the entire industry. His belief in Derek led him to emailing a bunch of supplement companies and brands looking for athletes, in the hopes that one of them would take a chance on Derek. And it didn't take long for that to happen. With Ed's cosign, Derek was offered his first supplement deal with one of the biggest supplement companies in the entire industry, Animal, a company which had enough capital to pay Derek a salary that would change his life. With this massive opportunity, Derek was able to quit his full-time job and go all in on the bodybuilding lifestyle like he hadn't been able to before. Derek had just gotten his big break, something which he had been working incredibly hard for. He knew going in that bodybuilding was going to be an investment in himself and require a lot of sweat equity to get a return on that investment, and his first return was with that Animal sponsorship. Now at this point, his agreeing business was completed, so he no longer had to worry about balancing schoolwork and training. His newfound time and freedom was going to unlock a different beast, and the IFBB was not ready. 1 month later, Derek stepped on stage at the 2017 NPC USA Championships, this time a light heavyweight. And the added size was exactly what Derek needed to take the next step. It was incredible how he managed to come in with that much added size and look even more aesthetic and full than the year before. It was outstanding what he brought to the stage. The improvement in his vascularity, hamstrings, and back were absolutely jaw-dropping, and set Derek up to run away with the overall victory and ultimate distinction for an amateur bodybuilder, IFBB Pro status. Derek in 2014 set out to be one of the biggest names in bodybuilding within 2 to 3 years, and in his 3rd year, he was not only officially a pro, but widely considered as the hottest commodity in bodybuilding. His accomplishment can be put in even better perspective when looking at the quote that he gave to the Tribune Star. Derek says, "When I first started to compete, my goal was to shock the stage. I think I pretty much accomplished that, but I was not completely satisfied. I knew I could be even better." And Derek was not only leaps and bounds better, but accelerating at a rate that very few could match.
Welcome to the IFBB. As an IFBB pro and the reigning Mr. USA, what piece of advice could you give all the NPC competitors going to be watching this video?
Train hard, train smart, and be consistent. Do it with a good attitude. Don't go into these shows strictly just for winning and losing. Yes, the goal is to come to the shows to win, to place first, but do it with a good attitude. I mean that by good camaraderie with all the other bodybuilders. Placings, once you're here, the grind during the prep, that's when you're battling for the title. Once you're here, you enjoy the time.
Wasting no time, Derek made his pro debut 1 month after USA's at the 2017 Tampa Pro. He knew he had the makings of a top contender immediately, so there was no reason why he couldn't test his physique among some of the best in the world and see where he stacked up. Standing 5'6", it only made sense for Derek, given his development at the time, to compete in the 212 division. His proportions and size were made for that division, and with the lack of elite talent across the board, he stood a very good chance at making a strong impression. On show day, however, he did a lot more than that. He dominated the prejudging, bringing the most complete package of the top 6 and performing like a veteran rather than a rookie, like he had been in that position before. When the finals were announced, he was awarded the first place medal and crowned the 2017 Tampa Pro champion, winning his debut in dominant fashion.
What did you think about this whole, when he said, I want to be a bodybuilder, and I don't know if he ever said I want to be a pro bodybuilder, it's kind of an odd, different thing for someone to want to be. What were your thoughts about it?
I believed in him. I knew if he said he was going to do something that he would do it. And he said he wanted to be a bodybuilder. I said, great, I want to follow you, watch you, enjoy it. Then he said, I want to be Mr. Olympia. I believed in him.
Can't say that just yet.
Well, but you're headed to the Olympia.
We're headed to the Olympia.
I still believe in you, and I still know you will be Mr. Olympia.
With this kind of momentum and start to his career, it only made sense with the Mr. Olympia right around the corner that Derek would throw his hat in the race. The 212 lineup was set to feature the best in the entire division, which included Jose Raymond, another one of Derek's biggest inspirations coming up in the industry. Not to mention reigning 212 champion Flex Lewis, who was seeking to capture his 6th title. Being able to simply grace the stage with that company was an honor in and of itself. But at the end of the day, it was still a competition, and Derek still had to prove that he was deserving.
Our next competitor won the USA, won his first pro show, and here he is at his first Olympia. Please welcome Derek Lunsford.
He'd head into the show more relaxed than ever due to the stakes being so low. Still, he brought his best physique to date with better color, size, and conditioning than Tampa. Although minor, Derek did make a noticeable improvement in the month leading up to the Olympia. That improvement, however, was still not enough to hang with the likes of Flex, Ahmad Ashkanani, Jose Raymond, and David Henry, as Derek finished in 5th place. This was the worst placing of his career thus far, but considering it was his rookie season and he still displayed the best shape on stage, it was clear that Derek with enough determination could very well be the future of the 212 division. Top 5 at your first Mr. Olympia in your first year as a pro is highly impressive regardless of division. So with Derek being the new contender on the block, as well as his quick progression as a pro, his name was starting to make the rounds in the entire bodybuilding community because of his eye-popping shape highlighted by his tiny waist. Derek hadn't realized it yet, but the expectations around him were going to start to mount. New fans entering the sport were discovering him day by day as his social media engagement would skyrocket, something that I like to call the Mr. Olympia effect. The moment you make an impression at the Olympia is the moment you make a name for yourself in the bodybuilding world. But Derek was taking this newfound fame very well, remaining humble and attributing his success to God. He was also consistently keeping fans up to date on his career and journey and giving back by sharing as much knowledge as he could with his fans.
Cheap, but good, clean carbohydrates, doesn't increase insulin too quickly, so just a steady energy. I like to eat this with breakfast, for sure, maybe throughout the day or whatever, but getting closer to the show, I'll eat this as my main carbohydrate source, usually post-workout.
With a top 5 placing at the Olympia, there was no need for Derek to do any other shows. He was coming for Flex Lewis and coming for the Olympia title. The anticipation for the improvement that Derek would make would be very high, especially considering he'd have all the time in the world to grow and improve while focusing on peaking his physique perfectly. With Derek now in the mix, the 212 division had gotten more exciting than it ever had been before, and with the 2018 Olympia underway, it was time for everyone to see the next iteration of Derek Lunsford. With the initial comparisons over and the prejudging underway, Derek was placed right next to Flex Lewis, clearly indicating that the judges had seen enough improvement from 2017 to move him up. He was tighter than the previous year and brought a slightly better conditioned package, which only improved as he kept posing. With Flex Lewis bringing incredible mass and proportion, and Kamal bringing razor-sharp conditioning, Derek was going to have to ensure that his presentation would be perfect to have a crack at the title. It was Flex Lewis's last Olympia appearance, and for Derek to be able to dethrone him would be a story for the ages, but to do that, he'd have to get through Kamal. The judges would bring back Derek, Flex, and Kamal for the final comparisons of prejudging to solidify the top 3. So regardless of what happened moving forward, Derek was going to improve on his 2017 placing. It was the past versus the present versus the future, in one of the best call-outs of that entire Olympia.
Staying under 212 pounds, it's exploding through the division is what's happening, and that concludes our 212 preliminary judging, and we're going to see tomorrow night how it plays out.
With the finals underway, the general consensus was that Flex Lewis had retained, considering the fact that he was never moved during prejudging and made both Derek and Kamal look small, all while bringing great conditioning. It was clear that Flex was probably going to get number 7. What created the most anticipation, however, was who was going to come in second. Was the up-and-comer Derek Lunsford going to make the massive leap from 5th to runner-up? Or was the vet Kamal El-Gargani going to stop him in his tracks? Well, when Kamal was announced as 3rd place finisher, it was just Derek and Flex standing side by side. The angst was palpable through the screen as Derek was unable to stand still with the lights shining brighter than they ever had. The prospect of being in contention for the title made things incredibly real. But when it was time to announce second place,
Please take the second place award, the Olympia silver medal. The check for $19,000 to our runner-up this evening, Derek Lunsford.
All right, Derek Lunsford's going to take second place, Sean Ray. A big showing for this young man who was kind of burst onto the scene last.
In the eyes of the judges, Derek was the second best 212 bodybuilder in the world, and made a leap big enough to validate that top 2 placing. Now, if he hadn't already arrived, the 2018 Mr. Olympia would be Derek Lunsford's coming out party. And with Flex Lewis's retirement leaving the 212 throne empty, it seemed like it was Derek's turn to take the division into the next generation. Despite not reaching his goal of winning the title, he had the most fun at a show he had ever had due to just being happy to be there. With Derek riding the high of a second place placing at the Olympia, the work was not done. Being allergic to complacency, he knew he had to work harder than he ever had in his career if he was going to win the next Olympia, an idea which seems surreal given how quickly he became a contender. At 26 years old, Derek had established a reputation as one of the most promising young talents in bodybuilding. But with that title came a different magnitude of expectation that Derek hadn't dealt with before. He had only been improving over the last few years, and the expectation of the 2019 Olympia was that Derek would eventually get over the hump. The majority of his prep was spent grinding away and documenting his progress all over social media platforms, with YouTube giving his fans the most intimate insight. As the show drew closer, all of the excitement around the 212 division would center around who would become the successor to Flex Lewis. An overwhelming majority of people were leaning towards Derek taking the title, assuming he was able to at least replicate his package from 2018. And this was also assuming that Kamal El-Gargani wouldn't make a drastic improvement at 50 years old. Well, when the initial comparisons and individual routines were over, Derek did bring a package on par with 2018. The only issue was Kamal. See, Kamal being a lot older couldn't play the size game with Derek, so he had to maximize his biggest strength, conditioning. Kamal brought the best conditioning of any athlete at the entire Olympia that year. He was absolutely razor sharp from top to bottom, and in that first call out, it was very apparent. Kamal's graininess and dense muscle tissue was the ultimate display of muscle maturity, considering he was twice Derek's age. But that didn't stop the vet. He brought his best package ever, and neither Sean Clarita or Derek was ready. What also didn't help Derek was the fact that he was holding on to a bit of water. This isn't usually a big deal for supremely talented bodybuilders, but standing next to Kamal, who was bone dry and complete all around, really exposed Derek and Sean's inferior conditioning. From the ridiculous detail in his back to his impeccable ab separation in his front shots, the prejudging was all Kamal El-Gargani. Despite that, the fans of Derek were hoping for a finals comeback.
What does Kamal have to do? What does Derek have to do tonight in the finals?
Let's say Kamal just had to, keep, I'm sure that Chris is doing this, keeping him the way it is, maybe dry out just a bit. For Derek, he needs to dry out considerably. So he has all the size, he has all the width, so he's already beating Kamal on a width and V-taper and X-frame, so he needs to get that dryness. So whatever needs to be done in the next 5 hours, him and his coach should be focusing on that one. Yeah.
When the finals came around, Kamal only got drier and harder while Derek was still working on shedding a little bit of water. While he was still better than the rest of the lineup, it wasn't clear who the judges were favoring considering they were both at center stage. But while Kamal improved with every pose, Derek was looking more and more washed out as the finals were coming to a close. And at that point, it seemed pretty clear who was going to get the victory.
The check for $20,000, the Olympia silver medal, to our runner-up this evening, Derek Lunsford.
All right, there it is. There it is, Kamal El-Gargani. Derek Lunsford, second place.
I'm telling you, it came down to muscular maturity. Kamal had that maturity at 47 years young, holds off the 26-year-old. Derek's going to see a whole lot of days like this, and he's going to do nothing else but improve. I mean, look at the shape.
Look at the shape.
For the second consecutive year, Derek was the Olympia runner-up, a result he was immensely disappointed in. According to Derek, this was his toughest loss to accept. Despite his best efforts, the best man won at the 2019 Olympia and not only became one of the many new champions that year, but the oldest competitor to win an Olympia in any division in history. So for Derek and James Brown, it was back to the drawing board. He knew deep down that he had what it took to win it all. He just needed to reassess and figure out where he needed to improve the most. He was still so young and still had so much mileage left, there was no doubt that he could eventually hit his stride. He just needs to figure out what that stride looked like. As he got deep in his prep for the 2020 Mr. Olympia, Derek remained relatively active on most social media platforms, with the exception of YouTube where he only posted 2 videos that whole year. For months, loyal fans would wonder why Derek hadn't posted. Either he was making some serious improvements and keeping things hidden to shock everyone, or his prep was not going as planned. And as we know in bodybuilding, when it comes to this scenario, it could go either way. However, for Derek, expectations had never been higher. He came into the IFBB as somewhat of a prodigy, and despite having a great career so far, wasn't judged like just any other bodybuilder. This was supposed to be the future of the 212 division. So, as most people wondered, what was it going to take for Derek Lunsford to finally get over the hump and win it all? But while the internet kept speculating and debating, Derek shut out all the noise and looked to his main source of comfort in God. Keeping his faith was crucial for Derek to maintain his motivation and drive, and had been a huge part of his bodybuilding journey thus far.
I am my most mentally strong when I'm spiritually strong. So when I'm walking that walk with Christ, I'm praying constantly every day, throughout the day, and I just feel like I'm living my life walking in Jesus' footsteps a little closer, I feel mentally stronger, which then I become physically stronger. So it's kind of like, I've said it before, you know, spiritually, being spiritually strong helps my mental strength, and then therefore I become a better bodybuilder physically.
Changing his outlook during prep helped him become a lot more positive as well, because his previous one was making him miserable. At this point, the anticipation for Derek was even higher than the year before, because fans were expecting some drastic improvements, primarily in conditioning. With the Olympia being his only show for the year, as it had been for the last few years, there was no reason why this wouldn't be the year of Derek, but all fans could do is wait. As the prejudging was underway, it was pretty evident early on that Derek was going to struggle. His conditioning was worse in 2019, as he lacked the separation and fullness that we all knew he was capable of. What didn't help matters was the fact that Kamal, Sean, and the rest of that lineup brought their best conditioning, which was surely to expose Derek. His structure had always been one of the best in the entire bodybuilding industry, but his inability to nail his conditioning was hurting his chances at capturing that elusive Olympia title. With the transition to each new pose leading to no changes in movement for Derek, he found himself in the same spot until the end of the call-out, where he was moved to the outside and surpassed by Ahmad Ashkanani, deservingly. Not only was Derek no longer in the hunt to win, but he was out of the top 3 entirely, a revelation which was a blow to the gut. To be the guy in the division who was supposed to be the next up and to fall so many placings in front of the entire bodybuilding world was devastating. He was now right back where he was in 2019, except the mountain he had to climb was significantly greater. The transformation he would need to have by the finals was just unrealistic and impractical to achieve. And the question going into the finals was, what happened to Derek Lunsford? Despite coming back slightly improved from the prejudging, that wouldn't be enough, as everyone else in that lineup did the exact same, and the final comparisons reflected that. He had put on a great posing routine for the fans and still displayed his appreciation for the art, but knew that he had come up short. Sean Clarita would win his first Olympia, beating Kamal, who came in second, followed by the late George Peterson in third. His disappointment was immense, and a 4th place finish a massive disappointment. That package was not Derek at his best. He had width that could rival most open competitors, and a V-taper and vacuum that would shine in even classic, a combination of features that is relatively rare in modern bodybuilding. But surely with his talent and determination, he had what it took to win it all. But in order to figure out what to change, he needed to go back to the drawing board. Step 1 was determining where he went wrong. See, with the pandemic delaying the Mr. Olympia 3 months, Derek's timeline to peak was going to be different than the year before. But it seemed like he began prep in his normal time frame, possibly causing him to over-diet, which leads to a washed out and flat look. This was similar to his weakness in 2019, where he wasn't as sharp as he could have been. To the people who had been following Derek's career closely up until this point, it was clear that getting sharp was his biggest pain point. He had been a pro for 3 years and had gotten his physique pretty far, but wasn't able to take that last leap to shock the stage like he wanted to. Now, step 2 was determining what the right path forward was. See, up until this point, he would easily surpass 240 during the offseason. His body was clearly genetically predisposed to putting on a lot of mass, and with the division having a weight cutoff of 212, it was possible that Derek's issue stemmed from the weight cut depleting him too much. But the more pressing issue was coaching. At this point, Derek had primarily been coached by James Brown, who he credits as having helped him immensely at the beginning of his bodybuilding career. But Derek knew that it was time to make a drastic pivot, a pivot that would help him maximize his physique in a way that he could never imagine. Now, when looking at the list of elite coaches in the IFBB, you think of names like Milo Sarchev, Chris Aceto, and Matt Jensen. But despite how talented those coaches are at getting the best out of their athletes, there is one man that stands above the rest: Hani Rambod. Hani Rambod at the time was the mastermind behind Jay Cutler's 4 Olympias, Phil Heath's 7, and Jeremy Buendia's 4. He was called the Pro Creator for a reason. His world-class reputation and resume were the reasons why he was the ideal coach for Derek to align himself with to finally take over the 212 division. Their very first encounter even foreshadowed that union.
How did you get this far?
I just worked my butt off.
Yeah. And again, for those that don't know the story, Derek and I first met, unbeknownst to me, in 2016, right?
Yeah, 2016.
2016,
at the Evagen booth, right?
Evagen booth, little old Derek Lunsford.
I'm with Jelson, my wife, and I'm like, hold on, that's Hani Rambod. And she's like, who? And I'm like, that's Hani Rambod. Okay. I gotta go say something to him. Hold on, just stay right here. I gotta say something. She's like, okay. So I ran up to you and I said, hey, Hani. And you were like, oh, hey, how you doing? And I was like, hey, can you make me the next Phil Heath? And you were like,
and I laughed.
ha ha. He started laughing. I was like, okay, yeah, have a nice day. I was in this fanboy moment. I'm not gonna lie. And I was like, well, all right, I said it. And this is my motivation because one day we're gonna have a serious conversation about working together.
With Derek intent on finally completing his mission of capturing the 212, he enlisted the help of Hani Rambod in March of 2021.
What's up, everyone? We are almost 20 weeks out from the 2021 Mr. Olympia competition. First time we're getting ready to train together. We're going to do chest. We're here in Destination Dallas. Slow. Down. Hold it right there. Hold it. A few more.
With the Olympia just 7 months away, that gave them plenty of time to get to work. The revamped Derek Lunsford was on the way, and his progress and confidence for that prep would be on display on his channel as he got back to posting consistently on YouTube. Giving the fans access into his latest chapter and physical and mental struggles that came with it, Derek was looking like he would cook up something special. It was somewhat of a revitalizing for Derek and his brand, spearheaded by his videographer, John Trevor Media, who showed a serious dedication to documenting Derek's mission through his videography. And it was also clear that he was building a very strong bond with him and Jelson. Now, with Hani Rambod committed to his redemption, it was win or go home. And with recency bias causing a lot of fans to sleep on him and write him off heading into the 2021 Olympia, Derek had to remind people that he had the greatest potential in all of men's bodybuilding. But the silence around his name, along with the tempered expectations, allowed him to prep with a clear mind and a lot less stress. With the support of his mom, longtime girlfriend, and Hani, it was time to see what kind of package Derek's hard work in the 2021 offseason would yield. As Derek stepped on stage for the first time, it was immediately evident that this was the Derek that everyone was waiting for. His color was perfect, lines outstanding as always, but the standout attribute of Derek Lunsford's 2021 Olympia package was his conditioning. It finally seemed like he was peeled out of prejudging, but more importantly, he didn't have to compromise any size as he was still very full. The improvements weren't drastic, but they were definitely noticeable. But this 100% was Derek Lunsford's potential fully maximized at 212, and not a lot of people were sure was going to happen this year. Coming off of his most disappointing placing as a pro and showing up at the next Olympia, absolutely lights out was the best story of the entire prejudging. Now, this isn't to downplay Sean and Kamal, as they weren't slouches either, and the disparity between these three guys was very slim. But Derek and Hani helped find the missing piece of the puzzle in the offseason to maximize Derek's beautiful shape. He was finally complete and everyone could see it. It was clear by the end of the prejudging that Derek was the frontrunner for the 212 title. The question is, could he finish the job? When the finals rolled around and he came out for his posing routine, it was very clear who the next 212 Mr. Olympia was. If his confidence didn't show during his finals routine, it certainly shined during the confirmation round. Derek's stage presence was as bright as it's ever been and clearly indicative of a guy who was going all out. He had always had a very polished presentation, whether he was in a position to win or not. But the 2021 Olympia felt different. He had an aura that kept anyone who watched that live stream or attended the show continuously gravitating towards him. As him and Sean Clarita battled for the win, the judges maintained the anticipation by keeping just those two out there, giving no indicator as to who was currently in the lead because the reigning champ himself came back improved. A final swap of positions on the stage further added ambiguity as to who was going to come out on top, but with how impressive both guys were and how hard they were posing in the end, it could go either way. With the confirmation round over and both men brought back out to the stage to announce the winner, the tension and anticipation could be felt through the screen. The question on everyone's mind was whether we would hear "and still" or He had finally done it. Through his grit, determination, and faith, Derek had grinded his way to an Olympia title, a title that was well earned by knocking off a reigning champ. Anyone who had been following his career up until this point and really got to know Derek the man could feel his overwhelmed emotion on that stage. He had worked so hard to get there, and he absolutely deserved every bit of that moment.
All glory to God, 100%. Jesus Christ is my Savior.
The prejudging, this was going to be close. We all could see that you finally brought everything that we thought you could bring. The last couple of years, you kept just missing it. Just missing it. You finally put it together. New team in place this year, and it paid off in dividends.
Yes, sir. It's been several years. I've been fighting for this title, and I just couldn't seem to get it together. I was maybe too focused on other things, other competitors. I don't know what it was. I just know that my walk spiritually with Christ wasn't what it is today. That's number one. That's why I keep pointing to the heavens, man. But yes, my coach, Hani Rambod, he has helped me tremendously, become a much better professional bodybuilder all around. It's not just about the physique, it's about the mind too, and focusing on myself and just learning to get better, learning how to be a better bodybuilder and better professional. I have a great family. I wouldn't even call them friends. They're family that keep me, grounded and focused in bodybuilding and life with Christ, and I couldn't do without you either. So all of you guys give me so much support. I love you all. Thank you so much.
Before Derek could even leave the venue, his newfound fame and status had already presented itself as fans peppered him with congratulations and requests for pictures. He was on cloud 9 and absolutely on top of the entire world at that moment, but despite his new status as a new champion, Derek never forgot to credit his faith. His entire career, he had always placed heavy emphasis on remaining humble and always giving thanks to Christ, because by removing the credit from himself and attributing it to a higher power, he could always remain humble and grateful for his blessings. This is something that hasn't always been easy for him, as he's mentioned to his fans that there had been points early in his career where he struggled to remain humble and keep his ego in check. But after going through the lull of having disappointed in 2020, he forced himself to let God take full control moving forward. Derek's also asserted that he's grateful for not having won too early, because even he admits that he could have won the Olympia sooner, but he wasn't doing things the right way. So having those moments to humble him and devoting himself to God allowed him to avoid going down a dark path. With the attention and distractions of being Mr. Olympia heavily prevalent, Derek realized it was more important than ever to lean on God, because he didn't want to allow his blessings to change him and affect his ego in any way, so his faith became more important than it had ever been. What was also very important, as it had always been, was his relationship. See, by 2022, Derek and Jelson had been together for a decade, and she had been his rock for the entirety of his bodybuilding career. Every win and loss, every high and low, she was there, right by his side, and in March of 2022, they tied the knot. 2022 also saw Derek ramp up the quality of his social media content. With new thumbnails and more cinematic shots, Derek placed heavy emphasis on putting out quality content that could inspire the newer generation, like Jay and Ronnie's videos did for him. But what was most interesting about Derek's early offseason was how much bigger he was than any previous year. Now, it was no secret that Derek was genetically predisposed to holding onto a lot of mass, and it had been on display in the offseason throughout the years. However, by 2022, it was clear just how much muscle he had put on over the years, and that would be on display at the 2022 Pittsburgh Pro guest posing. For those who may not know, the Pittsburgh Pro for years had been a platform for the top IFBB pros to guest pose for the fans and show their progress in the thick of the offseason. It's been the site of some impressive moments like a 300-pound Kai Green in 2013 and a juicy Sean Roden in 2018, rest his soul. But the most anticipated moment of this entire show is a comparison between the guest posers, especially considering that it's customary for the Mr. Olympia to be there as well. It's essentially an early look at how the top IFBB Open pros in the world stack up to each other at that point in their preps. This gives the fans an early indicator as to who's likely to show out and who will be behind the competition at the upcoming Olympia. The big storyline going into this show was the absence of reigning champion Big Ramy, who wouldn't be guest posing for unknown reasons. This was a huge disappointment. However, Derek, being the reigning 212 champion, also got an invite to guest pose with the big boys, mainly for entertainment of the fans, which would make up for Big Ramy's absence. Yet, what ended up transpiring was Derek setting the bodybuilding world ablaze with the physique he brought to the stage. Derek did not only look massive, but he still had his lines and shape intact. He was reportedly pushing around 260 with a 5'6" frame, but was managing to still hit a deep vacuum, all while displaying ridiculous conditioning for being that far out from a show. It was shocking. Though what really got people talking non-stop about this showing was how Derek looked standing next to the likes of Nick Walker, Brandon Curry, and Hunter Labrada. He was arguably beating all of them. If that was an actual competition that was going to be judged that day, Derek looked like one of the favorites to win, along with Nick Walker, and that was a consensus all over social media. Everyone was talking about Derek's comparison to the Open guys and how good he looked at the Pittsburgh Pro. All of this talk around Derek sparked what became one of the biggest storylines of the 2022 season. Should Derek Lunsford move to the Open? With what the fans saw in Pittsburgh, there was no reason why he couldn't step on that stage and do relatively well. He clearly had the mask to hang, so what was stopping him from making the switch? Well, to some, Derek's mask was not necessarily an indicator that he would dominate the Open, especially having to compete against a lot of taller and overall bigger guys like Big Ramy and Samson Dauda. However, despite how much bigger a lot of those other guys were, they didn't have Derek's unique combination of traits. But surely, he'd want to go back and defend his 212 title, right? Well, that idea was put in question when Derek appeared on Hani Rambod's podcast discussing health and wellness. In that podcast, Derek and Hani alluded to his rapid growth in that recent offseason, growth that was forcing him to have to consider his long-term health.
Now, at the end of the day, I don't think people realize how much you have to kind of control your weight.
Yeah, it's constantly dieting and constantly doing cardio, consistently in the gym. I mean, the gym's no problem, I enjoy it, but consistent cardio, consistent dieting, you know, and I like to enjoy some life. I like to enjoy some foods that are out there too. I don't go crazy off the diet.
This is code for you like to eat.
This is code for let's go get barbecue after this.
No,
That's
this is code for literally he can eat more than any human I've ever seen. You know, like Hottie he doesn't eat like him. Jay, Phil, none of them can eat like Derek. And Derek literally legitimately has to hold back how much he eats, and I have to constantly ride him like a fat kid that wants a Twinkie.
I want to continue to grow and shape and mold my physique, and I want to have no limitations to that. That has been my overall mindset from the very first moment I started bodybuilding.
It's so much more like wrestling now when you have to suck in and try to make weight. And if you're 184 and you're trying to wrestle 154s and you're sitting here going, okay, I'm 182, I got to lose 30 pounds. Some of it's fat, sure, some of it's water, but a lot of it's also muscle mass that you got to turn around and say to yourself, this is inherently against the whole nature of bodybuilding to try to sit and schedule yourself to be able to be at that weight on that given day. And you know that you're not your best. You're just trying to look your best against the people you're standing next to.
For Derek to be almost 260 in the offseason and have to cut down to 212 was clearly an indicator that he may be getting too big for the division. Hell, it was possible that he had already been too big for the division. But with the recent talks around what's best for his health and his continued growth, the prospect of him competing in the Open became more and more likely by the day. The question was, when would it finally happen? In July of 2022, Chief Olympia Officer Dan Solomon alluded to having concerns about Derek's health as well. In an interview with Tarek El Gundy, he covered all of the speculation around Derek's move to the Open.
You were in Pittsburgh and you saw Derek Lunsford, okay? Now, what do you think? Should this guy go to the Open? Should this guy stay on the 212? Is there anything that you would suggest to him as a bodybuilding fan, as somebody who's an insider in the business?
So Derek's situation is more unique than any other. First of all, he's the reigning 212 champion. He hasn't even had a chance to go in and defend his 212 title yet. That's the first thing. But then we have a health issue. Not saying that Derek has a health issue. Derek's very healthy, so let me be clear about that. But here's why it's a health issue. Derek is nowhere near 212 at this point. We've seen it, right? Derek's much bigger than 212. So then we have to ask ourselves, what does he have to put his body through to get under 212 pounds?
Now, the reason why this was such a hot topic was because of its unprecedented nature. There had never been a Mr. Olympia champion to move divisions the year after winning it all, so there was a lot of debate as to how this should be handled if hypothetically it were to occur. Would Derek's top 5 in 212 count as a qualification for the Open Mr. Olympia? Or would he need to earn his way to the Open by winning a major show like everyone else? He certainly didn't have enough time to qualify on points. So would they possibly have him compete in both divisions at the same show? There were so many questions. And it was an interesting conversation given the fact that the Olympia was 5 months away and Derek would have to begin prepping soon. All signs pointing to Derek leaving the 212 division. But how would they get him into the Open Olympia in a way that wouldn't compromise the integrity of the competition? Well, Dan Solomon, Derek, and the rest of the Olympia coordinators found a way. On September 15, 2022, the Mr. Olympia Instagram announced that Derek Lunsford would be competing at the Olympia via a special invite. A unique method of qualification reserved for athletes with special circumstances. Cedric McMillan's military service, Big Ramy's COVID diagnosis, and Kai Green's legendary career are all special circumstances that gave them invites to the big show. But the biggest and most important factor to even getting one is an established name and reputation as a competitor in the IFBB, which all of the previously mentioned competitors had. Derek had that as well. Despite the fact that he never competed in the Open, his status as the 212 champ and his physique at the Pittsburgh Pro more than validated the idea that he deserved to be on that Open stage.
You've always wanted to be an Open
Absolutely.
competitor. You've always wanted to be an Open competitor. And a lot of people thought that you were being held back because you weren't being able to be at your maximum potential because you had to lose muscle getting ready for 212. It was just a matter of the timing of it.
To make a long story short, several months after the Olympia, all the way through the first of the year and the beginning of the year, I just kept training and training and training, eating my, clean bodybuilding meals, doing cardio, all that, feeling good, training good. And then I noticed March, April, May rolled around. I'm like, oh my God. I would be messaging him like, hey, my weight's here now. And he's like, okay, keep it there. And we actually need to come down 5 more pounds. He's like, keep it under 245. I'm like, okay.
So based on what you're talking about after the Olympia, it seems like your mind and your body were literally just hungry.
I just want to keep going
more. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
My training is good. I feel good. I think first, I don't think I want to go Open.
Yeah. What do I have to do?
Yeah. What I have to, and you're like, okay, well then you need to write a letter to Jim Mannion, Tyler Mannion, Dan Solomon, and Jake Wood, and request that you get a special invitation. So that's what I did. I put together an email. I sent it to them, and they talked, got back to us, and
obviously everybody knows now it's history. That everyone knows that now. You've been given the special invite.
And just like that, the 2022 Mr. Olympia had gotten significantly more interesting. Now, as exciting as the prospect of Derek competing in the Open was, he was almost instantly written off as a top contender. Understandably so, considering he had never actually dieted down for an Open show, so his true potential was going to be impossible to measure heading in. Very few people actually thought that he could win the whole thing, I being a part of the very few.
Yeah. He looks great. He looks great. I'm not trying to say he doesn't, but it's such a question mark for me.
It is.
Until I see him compared to any guy in the Open, I'm gonna always have a question mark. That's just how it's gonna be for me. So I can't even see him in the lineup visually right now.
Yeah.
Even though I know he has a good physique, I just can't see him in the lineup because I don't know anybody to compare it to besides guys that are similar to his height, like Hadi and Bona.
Yeah. Well, that's who I'm kind of comparing him to. Is I was thinking to myself, because I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, he's gonna look great, but is he gonna be big enough?
The excitement and anticipation alone was enough to create an aura for the Olympia that had been lacking for the last few years. With Big Ramy looking to three-peat and a cavalry of talent at his heels, everyone including myself couldn't wait for December. From the moment Derek came out in the individuals at prejudging, it was clear that we were about to witness something very special. His Open debut was the most highly anticipated storyline of the show because of the speculation over the last year. But the moment that Derek hit that front relaxed pose, he proved that he was meant to be there, and that his special invite was not a waste. He was obviously bigger than he had ever been on stage, which was expected, but what was more impressive was how well he carried that weight and how full he looked fully dieted down. Any detractor who thought he'd be too small was promptly proven wrong. This was a different beast, with every standout feature still there, but with more muscle. His already impressive back looked even more impressive with the added size, and the same could be said about his legs. That already impressive V-taper looked even gnarlier in that vacuum, and it was a drastic step up for his total package. The only weakness was that thorn in his side his entire career: conditioning. He could have dieted a bit more and come in a lot drier, but nonetheless, he still brought enough to be competitive and shock the stage once again, as had been his mission his entire career. When it was time to announce the first callouts during prejudging, his name was called. The judges clearly thought he could hang with the big boys, and it was time for him to prove that. He was placed right at center stage with Hadi Choopan at his all-time best. A massive test right away, but Derek did more than hold his own, as he did push the frontrunner. Hadi and Derek remained in the middle for the rest of the prejudging as Nick Walker and Samson Dada fought for third, and the reigning champ Big Ramy was fighting for fourth place with Brandon Curry, a shocking development. As the prejudging ended, the judges placed Brandon and Nick in the center, but it was clear that they were being compared for third or fourth place. Derek and Hadi were clearly the frontrunners, and Derek had shocked the bodybuilding world once again. To come into his first Open show ever and dominate most of the competition was a feat that very few saw coming, but it set up a very interesting final. It wasn't exactly clear who the judges had in first, but given Hadi's crisp conditioning, he was the favorite. But the show wasn't over. As the finals rolled around, the entire lineup impressed with their finals routines. But what we were really looking forward to was the confirmation round. It was obvious we were going to get a new Open champion with Big Ramy not being in the top 2, so the awards were going to be exciting regardless. The finals saw some shifting of places among the top 2 spots, which was definitely meant to keep the fans guessing, as by the end of the confirmation round, Derek and Hadi were off to the left by themselves. This made it clear for anybody who understood the intricacies of judging in bodybuilding that at this point in the confirmation round, the competitors in the middle were not in contention for the title. When the awards were announced, Big Ramy made history by placing 5th, and falling the most placings as a reigning champ since Samir Banu in 1984. In 4th was former Olympia champion Brandon Curry. In 3rd was budding star Nick Walker, and the last 2 spots came down to Derek and Hadi. The fact that Derek in his Open debut on the biggest stage in bodybuilding was in contention for the Olympia crown was insane. So, win or lose, he would make history by making it as far as he did. But being the competitor that he is, he was hoping to hear his name called.
And new Olympia champion,
Derek wouldn't win, as Hadi Choopan would be crowned the new Mr. Olympia. While the rest of the world was shocked at how impressive Derek was, he knew he was going to be a contender from the beginning. He just had to prove it. Now, Hani Rambod was a winner regardless, due to Hadi Choopan being one of his athletes as well. Add to that the fact that he had also taken on Chris Bumstead, and it was a big year for that camp. But to the rest of the field, the cat was out of the bag. The question of whether Derek could stack up no longer existed. It was all about how long it would take before he could win the Open. A sentiment that did not exist just 24 hours prior. Sean Clarita reclaimed the 212 throne in Derek's absence, bringing an impressive package. But the 212 division definitely felt different without Derek. Fans, pundits, and bodybuilding media alike would all marvel at how impressive Derek was in his Open debut. Everyone was talking about how he was the biggest surprise of that entire lineup, not because former 212 athletes weren't talented, but the amount of them that successfully transitioned to the Open were few and far between. But this year's Olympia Top 2 featured not 1, but 2.
Count 'em, 2!
It's time for Derek to get back to work and see what improvements him and Hani could make to polish his Open look. With the 2023 season underway, there are plenty of storylines to look forward to. People are still talking about Big Ramy's downfall and his future. Not long after, Samson Dauda stunned everyone with his winning package at the Arnold Classic, making him a top contender. At this same show, Andrew Jack turned heads as well, and reigning 212 champ Sean Clarita got his shot against the big boys and placed top 5. But while the buzz around these guys was taking over headlines, it wouldn't last for long. Because 2 months after the 2023 Arnold Classic, the Pittsburgh Pro guest posing was set to take place. And to the surprise of no one, Derek was going to be back. After a shocking appearance the year before, fans knew exactly what to expect. It was the most highly anticipated guest posing in the entire IFBB, which further validates that Derek had truly developed the ability to mesmerize a crowd with his physique, and everyone couldn't wait to see him do it again. He looked a little bit wider in the lats, a little bit bigger in the legs, but his conditioning was noticeably better than in last year's guest posing. To have that separation in vascularity 5 months into his offseason was nothing short of spectacular. Meanwhile, the reigning champ was nowhere to be seen, due to his visa issues having to travel from Iran. This showing reminded everyone that Derek Lunsford was still one of, if not the biggest threat in open bodybuilding, just 1 year after making the switch. His rise had been rapid. He went from 212 champion to second place in the Open in a year. This meteoric progression had been the theme of his career so far. At this point, Derek had gotten well-earned praise from the entire industry, whether it be active or retired pros. However, in June of 2023, he'd get his biggest cosign when the king himself, Ronnie Coleman, declared Derek his favorite current bodybuilder. Ronnie had gotten familiar with Derek as they'd done some content together earlier in the year.
Derek Lunsford is probably the #1 favorite.
Ronnie admired Derek, not just his mentality as an athlete, but potential ambassador for the sport. See, when it came to the skills outside of bodybuilding that's required of an Olympia champion, Derek always had them, especially his speech. Anybody who's followed Derek's career until this point would know that he's an excellent orator and speaker. He's always had a way of speaking, projecting, and articulating himself perfectly to be able to resonate with whoever he's talking to, especially his fans. There is no doubt that in Derek Lunsford's retirement, motivational speaking could definitely be on the table.
Look, I love bodybuilding. I've always believed in my heart that I would be an open bodybuilder at some point in my career. I didn't think it would be this year. I come off the 212 Olympia last year with the title. The plan was always to defend the 212 title this year. But I was just so eager after winning the title to get back in the gym and keep training. I love it's so hard for me not to be in the gym pushing hard. And so after, you know, the months went by and then the guest posing at the Pittsburgh Pro happened, we realized, man, I put on some pretty good amount of muscle tissue. And even then we were thinking, you know, we'll still come back down and defend the 212 Mr. Olympia title. But after some deep consideration, we thought, you know what, my body wants to grow. It wants to be a bigger, better version of itself. And the 212 limitation was just gonna hold me back. So we said, you know what, this is the year, let's do it.
Now, while the summer of 2023 represented the heat of the Olympia qualification cycle, Derek and Jelson had something else to be excited about. In July of 2023, the pair announced on Instagram that they were expecting their first child in 2024. Now, as the months passed, the talks around the Mr. Olympia would ramp up again, as everyone was building immense hype around their physiques with constant updates, and Derek was no different. It was clear that he was looking to bring a tighter and harder package than last year. Exactly what he needed to have a go at the champ. With Hadi Rambod having proved the ability to help him with his conditioning in the past, it was clear that they were looking to fine-tune and perfect it, something that was much needed for Derek going up against Hadi. The reigning Mr. Olympia champion Hadi Choopan had built a reputation in the open for being the best conditioned athlete at almost every competition he set foot at. Having stayed peeled while coming in with improved fullness in 2022 made Hadi look very difficult to beat. There was no indication that the reigning champ wouldn't be as consistent as he's always been. And yet there was this feeling heading into the big show that this might be Derek's year. Call it hype, a bandwagon, or just a novelty of having somebody new at the top, but a lot of people were feeling that Derek was a better candidate to represent the Mr. Olympia. Despite the fact that it takes years to make it to the top of the Open, Derek's career so far had been nothing but unconventional, and his rapid success exemplified that. So while the idea of most competitors winning the Open Olympia in their second year seemed crazy, that wasn't the sentiment for Derek. If there was anybody that could accomplish that, it would be him, and everyone knew it. Further validating this sentiment was Ronnie Coleman, who in October of 2023, just 1 month before the Olympia, predicted Derek as the winner.
You think Derek will be Mr. O 2023? Yes, I do.
As Derek walked out on stage in the prejudging for his individual routine, the work and improvement he put in the offseason was glaring, specifically in his shape and conditioning. He was dry, drier than the previous year and a lot more vascular and striated. He was as full as ever, all while maintaining his signature lines that have been a staple of his physique since he was an amateur. Derek was clearly much better and a lot closer to his maximum potential as a bodybuilder. But his biggest obstacle, Hadi Choopan, was still in shape. But whoever the better competitor was would be clear once the comparison started. Derek was placed right in the middle, and joining him was Hadi Choopan. It was a difficult comparison given the two guys having the same frame and being equally as round and full. They were both right on par in terms of size, but the difference was conditioning, and not in the way most would expect. While Hadi was sharp, he wasn't as sharp as his winning year, while Derek was the sharpest and tightest he had arguably ever been. His V-taper and vacuum combination to add to his package only made it harder to take your eyes off him. It seemed to be really close between him and Hadi, and then Samson Dauda got switched with Derek at the end of the first round. The next time we'd see Derek on stage in the prejudging, it would be him, Samson, and Hadi, with each man given the opportunity to stand in the middle. While Samson dwarfed both Hadi and Derek and had a shape and flow that was just as good, he wasn't in his Arnold Classic condition. Yet it was still close between the three men, and it looked like it could have gone any way, especially as Samson closed the prejudging as the man in the middle. With the first round of the confirmation underway, it was clear that nothing would change in the top three, as Derek, Hadi, and Samson were in the top spots. This was evidenced by the fact that the rest of the lineup missed the mark all around. Some of the contenders who had strong showings in 2023 like Andrew Jack, Michael Krizo, and Hunter Labrada didn't bring enough to push anyone in the top three. So the question became, who in the top three would finish the strongest? Who wanted it more? They all had physiques worthy of an Olympia title, so it came down to the smallest of details. The position of the judges was not enviable at all. They all had to nitpick every aspect of these men's physiques, and when it came down to it, it was Derek who had the most refined package. From the front, the side, and in the back where bodybuilding shows are ultimately won. He had a physique that could take open bodybuilding into the next generation. Bringing the waist and vacuums of the golden era back into the open is something that fans had been wanting for a very long time. So, 2 of the top 3 having those specific features clearly indicated what the judges want the future of the open to look like. And it looked like Derek Lunsford, evidenced by his finish in the top spot in the final confirmation round. He put on yet another flawless posing routine and left the stage with a bang and the confidence of a man who knew he left it all out there. As the finals rolled around and the 5th and 4th placers were announced in Brandon Curry and Andrew Jacked, the announcement of 3rd place was going to make things very interesting. And with that, Derek and Hadi stood as the last 2 men standing, just like the year prior. But will the result be the same, or would history be made?
Gentlemen, please take the first place Olympia gold medal. The check for $400,000. The Sandow. And the title of 2023 Olympia champion to our winner, and new Olympia champion, Derek Lunsford.
And as has been the theme of his entire career, he in the blink of an eye was at the top of bodybuilding, the best bodybuilder in the world in fact. Overwhelmed with emotion, falling to his knees and slamming his fist on the ground, Derek probably thought he was in a dream. But with the confetti falling on the stage and a host of people swarming him, it was starting to feel all too real. Hadi Choopan did go over to congratulate his teammate before receiving the 2nd place medal. Raising his trophy in triumph, and clearly still pumped full of adrenaline, Derek delivered a raw and heartfelt message to the entire bodybuilding world.
Wow, what a moment, Derek. We talked about this all year long, brother. You said, I just want to hear 2 words, man. Just give me those 2 words. And those 2 words were, and new! Fantastic, Derek. You brought your all-time best. You made the improvements necessary. And just because you needed one more thing to celebrate tonight, Derek Lunsford, folks, becomes the first bodybuilder in history to win in 2 different Olympia divisions. Your 212 Olympia champion, now Mr. Olympia.
Oh my gosh, guys. I literally don't even know what to say. Oh my gosh. You guys supported me so much. Thank you so much, guys. This entire year, I've been focused on training, coming back, and I wanted to make history. I was on a mission to make history, to be the first 2-division Olympia champion ever. Number 18 Mr. Olympia of all time, and we did it, guys.
Now, while Hadi's removal of his medal and abrupt exit from the stage eventually caused a bit of controversy, it's clear that he did give Derek his props and accepted defeat, regardless of how his emotions manifested on stage. But for Derek, none of that noise mattered. He was the most blessed man in the world. He had just won the ultimate show, the show he dreamt of winning when he embarked on his bodybuilding journey just 8 years earlier. Through pure determination, his support system, and unshakable faith in God, he did exactly what he knew he was always meant for. The story and life of Derek Lunsford is one of unfettered faith and self-confidence, an example of how far simply believing can take you if you buy into yourself and your ability to achieve your goal. Today, Derek is enjoying life as the Mr. Olympia champion. Having gone on a press run of collabs and speaking about his Olympia victory, Derek has been doing everything he needs to maximize his exposure and the title of Mr. Olympia. Even Mr. Beast, who's one of the biggest YouTubers on the platform, reacted to Derek's physique.
Do we get to see the pump before we leave? I was bothering you a minute ago. No, you're good. Are you guys leaving? Yeah, I'm leaving now. Okay. I want to see what the biggest guy in the world looks like. Come over here? Oh, no. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right, I'm gonna need some help with your shirt. I just want to. Yeah, you want a little sweat. Holy sh! Are you a brick wall? That is crazy. That's wild. Hey, I'm keeping you to that. We're going to get a workout in. Of course.
In victory or defeat, Derek made it a point to pray after every Olympia appearance to maintain gratitude to God and remain humble. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how important the work of John Trevor has been to Derek's marketing and growth. Sharing the same Christian values as the Lunsfords allowed their collaboration over the years to be seamless and thoughtful. And the content they've been putting out has undoubtedly helped Derek's mission and journey to motivate and inspire hundreds of thousands of people. Now, what can we learn from the life of Derek Lunsford? It's that belief in a higher power, in yourself, and the direction you're going can be the driving force behind finally reaching the mountaintop. And through all the peaks and valleys, so long as you keep your faith and maintain humility, you will always come out on top in the end. I hope you all enjoyed watching the journey of Derek Lunsford unfold as much as I enjoyed making it. I'm Large Kofi. Thank you for watching.